We talk a lot about automation and programmatic, a lot of these thematics around our industry right now, and I want to make sure that we're endeavoring upon the next 2 days of with eyes wide open and sort of opportunity, right? So just to give you a little, for those of you that don't know me, I'm excited to get to know you and to learn from you over the next 2 days, because every time I come here I get smarter, so I consider it a great privilege. My background, I started out in manufacturing finance, and then I got in the consumer electronics business, and so I founded my first mobile company, which was a miserable failure in 1999, and then I sort of got into the handset business after that. And I was at that point in time, we were moving from 2.5 to 3G networks. We were going from voice to data-centric devices. And at that time, when I was at CTIA, and I don't know that I could really be qualified as a booth bag because I wasn't that hot, and I was actually using 3-letter acronyms a lot, but I was in the booth at CTIA talking about our products, and we were using the word convergence. And we've been using it around the industry now. It's been the year of mobile for 14 years, right? We're in 2014 now, et cetera. It's sort of, it's coming, and convergence is real. And I walked out of CES this year and I did my wrap up and I was like, okay, maybe I'm ready to eat that. I'm ready to buy that. I'll put my money on the table, right? And I think that was a big part of what I took away this year, and I think it's a great sort of stage setter for us moving forward in the next 2 days. So I think the fluidity of content is the thematic for us, right? That it's moving from device to device. It is fluid. What the definitions, and one of the things I'm going to do is just give us a sort of vocabulary list so that we're all using the same words and meaning the same things when we talk, because I think it's going to help us with making our dialogue more meaningful. But if we're honest about the fluidity of content and this sort of omnipresence of video right now, we're chasing, we're not leading, which is really interesting, right? Because I think we have this, this humble hubris, right, about us being at a place of innovation and driving an innovation agenda, whether it's the shifting of dollars and where they're heading on the agency side and buy side, or it's the innovation of platforms that are enabling it. The reality is that audience behaviors are changing faster than we can keep up with time-shifted, binge viewing, cross-platform, et cetera, and what the tablet has done in the last 4 years as far as changing audience behaviors. At the end of the day, we are not leading and we are following. And I think that's really important. And so content is distribution, is following eyeballs, right, and audiences. And what comes next? Brands and dollars. And that's kind of where we are as a point in time, right? And I think that this is really important because what's happened, because we are in a position where we are sort of chasing, although we like to look at ourselves as leading, and most of us have a job description that would imply that, right? The reality is there's a ton of gray matter right now, and that gets to the fact as to why translation is an issue, and we need a lexicon and a vocabulary to have meaningful dialogue over the next 2 days, right? What's television? Is it the piece of hardware that sits on the wall? Because 50% of the guys at CES would tell you it's that 10-foot screen. The other 50%, or probably most of you in the room, would say that TV is the content that flows through it. But it doesn't just flow through that piece of hardware on the wall anymore, right? So what's video? And what's ROI? Because that and engagement seem everything we talk, whenever we talk about it in context, it always means something different, right? And so what's resulted as from this gray matter and all this infusion of technology, more devices, is this proliferation of a value chain that has many more players with many new titles and much more complexity, right? And most notably, it requires a new set of skills and talents. And I look at this as sort of, we are coming upon the point of arrival is that we are now in a whole-brained sort of point in time for advertising, which is very different. There was a really interesting article. I always get caught up on the plane on my industry reading, and so I caught up on Ad Age because I still like paper, feels good. That should make D happy coming from print. I was reading my Ad Age, and there was a great article about B2B marketing and how many CMOs in B2B companies like IBM, large enterprise guys, actually have engineering backgrounds, right? Which I think is really interesting, that now that we are sort of entering this time of whole brain, words like brand value and engagement, right? Where marketing communications, because of the nebulous nature of the language that we use, it's quite an inclusive place, right? Like, I'm a Marcoms major. You can sort of have a conversation with everybody. You can talk about your business and people get it. Everybody sort of gets marketing, or at least they think they do. But if we look at where we are today, and we're in a world of like 3-letter acronyms, and we're really an industry that is about software and enterprise and technology. Words like automation have not existed in non-manufacturing entities or enterprises, right? We're talking about automation now. We're talking about a change. And what's quite interesting is if you listen to the vernacular of technology and of automation, continuous improvement, things that have been inherent in endemic legacy in industries time and time again for, since the Industrial Revolution. This is stuff that people that make things have been with which have been challenged. it requires much greater precision, accountability, and at the end of the day, the language of our business, of our industry, is becoming more and more about business, right? So now we're kind of at a time where we're being forced to actually understand our client's business to be able to drive measurable outcomes and ROI, which means we have pretty soon, I believe the end point is we're gonna have to start talking about the P&L more often in our business discussions, which for me is very exciting. Dee and I were talking about the class she's getting ready to teach this semester at university, and it's a brand class, and I was wondering if the new marketing textbooks yet have the words programmatic and RTB or a chapter on automated buying. Do marketing classes even talk about buying? Because that feels like that's a big part of what we do, and yet it's not necessarily sort of at the foundational levels. We're still an elitist class in this room, and I think we have to recognize that in order to bring the industry with us, which is where at the end of the day all of us will reap the greatest rewards, we have to bring the industry with us and educate and make everyone part of the conversation, not retain this sort of elitist dialogue that we've had thus far, and that's a big part of the vocabulary. The need for a brand to be always on and constant comms, is also sort of met with this challenge that we have specifically on the agency side. Christy and I were talking about it yesterday, to do more with less, right? And I think this is a great opportunity for us to just pause for a moment, flip the coin, and say this is not about reaction. This is not about, sort of the idea of being commoditized as an industry. This is about opportunistic, where we're actually going to leverage technology as a business lever to move the needle for more measurable outcomes for the CMOs we serve, as well as the C-suite in its entirety. As I said, all of these things that we're talking about, automation, et cetera, they've been challenges that other industries have been plagued, right? And I just want to pause for a minute. We're talking about the ubiquity of video, about television. I just want to take a minute and give you a little flashback, right? Because I don't know about you guys, but I have deja vu every time I talk about this. In 1999, there was a company called Napster, and a guy named Lawrence Lessig who defended them, right? He was a Stanford, I believe, attorney. He's now at Harvard. Had defended them sort of in the court case, and what was happening in 1999? People were using music as a means of social sharing. Sharing music was how they were socializing, right? We were moving from dial-up modems to DSL, so we had faster and more bandwidth. Content was more transportable, right? It was easier to actually share content or bytes of content. And what happened? Well, the best quote that I hear, and I've used this analogy a lot, is that the music industry is alive and thriving more than ever, but the record industry is dead. We're kind of at a similar place with television and when we look at video. And I believe that we are at a turning point right now where we have a choice as to whether we become victims to technology and we are beholden to it, or we choose to embrace it and set a course for ourselves, right? So I think that we are on the cusp of a time of reinvention. And the question is, how do we actually reinvent? So we can take a choice and we can focus right now myopically on the flow of dollars, on the power base, which is basically where the dollars are, from where the dollars are coming and where they're being directed, or do we actually want to be at the helm of the ship of the course we're setting and charter new waters together and jointly? And I do believe, we talk a lot in advertising about this idea of a collaborative economy, right? And the idea of collaborative creative, and that sort of seems to be confined to the creative side of our business. But the reality is that the business side or the automation or the buying side of our business right now will see, I believe, the greatest acceleration, and we will hit the hockey stick and the tipping point as a result of collaborating and partnering. And so I'm excited that this is an incredible, fertile place to do that over the next 2 days. That being said, I just want to eat my own dog food and apply some language. So was looking at some of the things that we talk about in the industry. So just a couple things. Programmatic, RTB are two words that we use a lot and we use interchangeably, right? And I just want to programmatic. Let's generally refer to programmatic as the idea of using some type of technology platform to automate buying in some way, right? Isn't necessarily real time, may have sort of price controls, price floors in place. There may be early commitments, but it's the use of technology to automate the buying process. RTB is the impression by impression buying on a real-time basis, right? So I think we should use that lexicon. When we talk about TV this next couple of days, let's refer to TV as the linear premium content that typically flows through traditional cable networks and is now being distributed across multiple IP platforms. And when we talk about video and the ubiquity of video, that really is sort of content that is being created by new and up-and-coming content creators that are not legacy programmers and broadcasters, right? When you talk about ROI and you talk about engagement, Provide greater granularity and specificity, because quite often in context, people mean different things when they use those words. And last but not least, when we talk about measurement, let's also talk about performance. And let's close the loop as to how we're getting more, how we have greater knowledge and understanding of how media is performing and how we're measuring it specifically so that we can drive convergence of television and video and make buying and the workflow easier around it. Let's make sure that we talk about how we bring that upstream and actually make the workflow itself easier, as well as then it perform better on the other side of the pipe.